Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we continue to follow the turbulent yet deeply moving journey of the single mother Lythieuca and the righteous police officer Hùng. In the previous episodes, many of us could feel the genuine love they share, a love that rises above hardship, transcends past pain, and bridges the divide between two seemingly distant worlds. But in today's episode, an unexpected tragedy strikes, a brutal blow delivered to a life already filled with trials. No one could have foreseen that the person who would endanger Lythieuca would be someone familiar, someone she never thought to guard herself against. The attack not only leaves her physically wounded but also shatters the fragile trust she had fought so hard to rebuild. Lythieuca, a resilient, loving, and strong single mother, now finds herself teetering on the edge of life and death. Gravely injured, her health deteriorates rapidly, and even more dangerously, she is pushed into isolation, lost in the shadows of a dark conspiracy. Meanwhile, Hùng, the man who once vowed to protect her with all his heart and the honor of his badge, refuses to give up. He continues searching tirelessly, clinging to even the faintest of clues, holding on to an unwavering belief that she is still alive. Their love is once again being tested, not just by circumstance, but by the cruel hands of those determined to destroy everything. Will Hùng reach her in time, before it's too late? Is their love strong enough to survive betrayal, heartbreak, and the dangers closing in? Join us in today's episode to seek answers to these questions. Every moment is charged with emotion, every twist impossible to predict, and once again, we're brought closer to the true essence of love, sacrifice, trust, and the courage to walk through darkness to hold on to one another. Don't take your eyes off the screen, because what's coming next might just shake your heart. To everyone around her, Hùng mother was seen as a calm, experienced woman, a mother who offered her son unconditional love. She once told Hùng that she needed rest, that she wanted to go on an extended trip to escape the noise of the city. Hùng didn't doubt her. After all those years of hardship, he believed she deserved a peaceful break. But what he didn't know was that behind the facade of a relaxing getaway, his mother was quietly weaving a cruel and calculated plan. For a long time, she had refused to accept Lythieuca's presence in Hùng life. To her, Lythieuca was not just a woman with a past, she was the person who had stolen her only son away. From the day Hùng met Lythieuca, she noticed a stark change in him. He no longer obeyed her every word, no longer put his mother first. Sometimes, he even dared to argue, just to protect that woman. To Hùng mother, it was betrayal. And in her wounded pride, there was only one root cause for the rift between her and her son, Lythieuca. Her resentment grew with each passing day, festering into obsession. She became convinced that Lythieuca had manipulated her son, perhaps even bewitched him, making him blind to reason. In her eyes, this love wasn't real. It was a dangerous enchantment pulling her son away from his family and his values. And when she could no longer reason with him, no longer pull him back, she began to consider more drastic measures. Under the guise of travel, she left the city, not to rest, but to secretly search for someone who could carry out her dark intentions. She made her way to a remote area where certain groups of men, for the right price, would do anything. After days of quiet inquiries, she found them. She didn't ask them to kill, at least, not in words, but she made her demands chillingly clear: make Lythieuca disappear. Far away. For good. Leave no trace. Give Hùng no chance to find her again. She offered a substantial sum, enough to make any criminal listen. But with the money came a cold, heartless condition. They must threaten, abduct, and take Lythieuca far from the city. If necessary, they must ensure she could never return. She instructed them to keep everything under absolute secrecy. Hùng must never suspect a thing. Every trace must be erased. If possible, make it look like an accident. Or simply, a disappearance, silent and untraceable. All the while, Hùng believed his mother was traveling, out of his life, out of his relationship. He was trying to rebuild a peaceful life with Lythieuca, one without complications or fear. And Lythieuca? She lived each day as usual, unaware that her every move, every habit, was being watched, monitored by those waiting in the shadows to strike. Neither of them knew that the sky above was slowly darkening. And a blood-stained hand was quietly pushing them toward the edge of heartbreak, toward a tragedy neither of them saw coming. The gang hired by Hung's mother were men well acquainted with darkness and blood. They had no concept of morality. No limits. The moment they heard the staggering amount of money she offered, they accepted without hesitation. To them, it was just another job, simple and clean: snatch a helpless woman, make her disappear, and get paid. They tailed Hoài for days, studying her every move. They knew what time she left for work, when she came home, and that she lived alone, with no close relatives nearby. They waited for the perfect moment. And when night fell, when the streets began to empty, Hoài quietly returned home, unaware that the darkness was waiting to devour her. She had just parked her motorbike by the sidewalk, key in hand, when a figure lunged at her from behind. A chloroform-soaked cloth was pressed firmly over her nose and mouth. She struggled instinctively, but within seconds, her vision blurred, and then, nothing. They moved swiftly, as if rehearsed. Her unconscious body was dragged into a waiting vehicle, hidden from sight. No neighbors saw a thing. Not a sound was heard. They drove her deep into the mountains, a place without phone signals, without cameras, without witnesses. A place where, even if something terrible happened, no one would know, until it was far too late. When they arrived, they pulled her out like a lifeless object. One of them rifled through her bag, stripping her of everything. Her phone. Her wallet. Her jewelry. Gold earrings. A keepsake necklace. Even the small ring she never took off, gone. Once they'd taken what they wanted, they exchanged a glance. A silent nod. No words. No hesitation. Two men carried her up a steep, jagged path, a sharp, slippery incline of loose stones and razor-edged rocks. She remained limp, head slumped, body heavy like a broken doll. At the summit, in a moment as cold as death itself, they shoved her. Her body tumbled down the rocky slope like discarded trash. Jagged stones tore at her skin. Her arms split open. Her head struck a boulder with sickening force. Blood trickled, then poured, soaking into pebbles, tree roots, and mountain earth. She kept rolling, unconscious, each turn carving new wounds, draining life with every bounce. Finally, she slammed into a final rock, then slipped down to the icy stream below. There she lay, motionless. Her clothes soaked in blood and mud. Hair tangled in dry branches. Blood still trickling from her head. Her breath faint, a fragile thread between life and death. Beneath the pale moonlight, her small figure looked like nothing more than a forgotten shadow swallowed by the wilderness. No one knew where she was. No one knew she was dying. And life, in that moment, was nothing more than a flickering candle in the cold night wind. That evening, after finishing his shift, Hung picked up Tony as usual. The little boy chattered away about trivial stories from school, while Hung, half listening, kept glancing at the clock, waiting for Hoài to walk through the door like she always did. But minutes passed. Then hours. And still, silence. No text. No call. No familiar footsteps. No trace of the woman he loved. At first, Hung tried to calm himself. Maybe she stopped somewhere briefly. Maybe her phone had died. But as the night deepened, a wave of unease began to rise in him, surging higher with each unanswered call. Each time he heard nothing but the void on the other end, his heart clenched tighter. He knew her schedule. He knew her habits. More importantly, he knew Hoài. She never made him worry like this. She always let him know if plans changed. She had never gone missing without a word. At the same time, elsewhere in the city, Du, an old friend who once had feelings for Hoài, was also thinking of her. After many failed attempts to win her back, tonight he had finally gathered the courage to visit her one last time. As he approached her neighborhood, his steps slowed. Just a short distance from her gate, something on the side of the road caught his eye, a familiar item lying carelessly in the dust. Her old fabric hat. And beside it, the woven basket she carried to work every day. Both items were dirty, misplaced, and disturbingly out of place. A sharp pang of dread pierced through him. He picked up the hat with trembling hands and rushed to her house, his gut twisting with fear. The front gate was ajar. The house, dark and silent. And there, in the yard, stood Hung, frozen, his eyes filled with confusion and anxiety. They locked eyes. No words. No arguments like before. Just a quiet, mutual understanding that something was deeply, terribly wrong. Du handed Hung the hat and the basket, his voice faltering. Hung clenched them in his hands, his breath shallow, a growing terror tightening around his chest. They sat on the doorstep in silence. Minutes passed. Neither spoke. There was nothing to say, because they both knew. This wasn't just a delay. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Something had happened. They thought of calling the police. But the law was rigid, an adult missing for less than 24 hours? Not enough grounds for an investigation. They were trapped in an invisible cage, helpless, knowing danger was near but unable to break protocol to save the one they loved. Hung looked up at the familiar window where Hoài used to sit, mending Tony's little shirts. Now, it was empty, dim and hollow. Inside, the child slept peacefully, still unaware that tonight, he might not hear his mother's voice again. Du leaned quietly against the wall, eyes shadowed with guilt and helplessness. Neither man knew where to begin. Where to search. Or why things had come to this. Hoài was never like this. She was careful. Attentive. She loved her child more than anything. She never left without a word. Never left Hung waiting without reason. But tonight, all signs had vanished. No message. No clue. Just an unbearable weight pressing on the chests of two men, waiting in the stillness of night. Hoping against hope that dawn would bring her back. That entire night, the small house remained cloaked in darkness. Tony sat huddled by the door, his eyes red and swollen. Every now and then, he would turn to Hung and ask in a choked voice. "Where's Mommy, Uncle Hung?" And each time the question came, it felt like someone was crushing Hung's chest. He had no answer. He didn't know how to answer. Tony was too young to understand what it meant to be missing, to be in danger, to understand that sometimes, the people we love the most, might never come back. Tony wouldn't stop crying. The little boy wandered restlessly through the house, searching every corner for the warmth of his mother's embrace. When he couldn't find her, he curled up in Hung's lap, gripping the hem of his shirt tightly, his tear-filled eyes staring into the emptiness. Waiting, hoping, that she would somehow step out from the shadows. The next morning, Hung made a painful decision. He brought Tony to his foster mother's home, someone who could care for the boy properly while he began the search. He gave careful instructions, promised to return soon. But inside, a silent dread gnawed at his soul. Hung couldn't wait for the 24-hour mark required to file a missing person report. He knew that every hour that passed was a window slowly closing. And if he waited, he might lose her forever. Du hadn't left. Despite the old tensions between them, none of that mattered now. They were bound by the same fear, the same desperate hope. That Hoài was still alive. No words were exchanged. No plans were drawn. Together, they simply began searching, visiting every familiar place where her footsteps might still linger. Their first stop, the small garden at the edge of the village. It was where Hoài harvested vegetables each morning. The red dirt path still held faint bicycle tracks, but she was nowhere to be found. The rows of green mustard and Malabar spinach swayed gently in the morning breeze, wet with night dew. But the wide-brimmed hat, the faded gloves, the soft shuffle of her steps. All were missing. Hung scanned every bush, every patch of wildflowers along the trail, eyes pleading for even the tiniest clue. They moved on, to the small market nearby. The vendors recognized her immediately, but every single one shook their heads. No one had seen her that day. No one knew what had happened. She was always the first to arrive, smiling, chatting with everyone, carrying baskets of fresh greens and eggs. But today, her stall stood empty. The absence felt strange, but no one imagined tragedy. As they left the market in silence, a cold wind swept through the narrow path between rice fields. Their coats flapped softly with every hurried step. Two men, two different lives, two different kinds of love. Now walking side by side, united in quiet anguish. Carrying a question neither could answer. Where is Hoài? Time passed in agonizing silence. Each hour, each minute seemed to drown the last flicker of hope. After more than a day of desperate searching, Hoài was still missing, without a trace. Worry turned into fear. Hùng knew he could no longer wait or stumble blindly in the dark. The moment the 24-hour threshold passed, he and Du went straight to the police station to file an official report. The atmosphere in the duty room was suffocating. Though Hùng had served in the force for years, this was the first time he had to fill out a missing person report, with the name of the woman he loved. His hands trembled slightly as he wrote her name. Not from nerves, but because each letter etched on the page carved deeper into the truth he didn't want to face. She was truly gone. And she might be in grave danger. Du was there to offer any information he could. He recounted that on the night Hoài disappeared, he had noticed a white car parked briefly outside her home. It drove off quickly before he could catch the plate number. The person inside was obscured by dark-tinted windows. It was only a fleeting image in the night, unclear, lacking detail. But it was the only lead they had. Because Hùng was one of their own, and had once stood shoulder to shoulder with many of the officers in difficult cases. The entire station mobilized. The on-duty captain personally assigned teams and opened an official investigation without delay. Search units were dispatched to key areas. What would normally take time for review was now moving at full speed. One team was sent to the area around Hoài home. They combed every inch, every wall, every patch of grass, every faint mark left behind. When they reached a small riverbank nearby, one officer stopped. His eyes locked onto the damp ground. Beneath crushed weeds and trampled grass were faint traces of dried blood. Scattered, but unmistakably human. Beside them lay a small wooden stick, its tip darkened with old, crusted blood. A short distance away were deep tire tracks, imprinted clearly into the soft earth. The size and pattern suggested a car had stopped here. Each clue was marked carefully. The area was cordoned off for evidence collection. The experienced investigators exchanged glances. None said a word, but the same scenario began forming in their minds. Hoài was likely attacked here. And then taken, elsewhere. The real questions were: who did this? How? And why? Meanwhile, Hùng stood silently before the temporary barricade, eyes fixed on the blood-stained earth. The wind blew hard. His chest ached, tight, burning. His fists clenched involuntarily. But inside, his heart was shattering. A fellow officer placed a hand on his shoulder, voice low but resolute. "We won't stop. We'll do everything we can to find her." Hùng didn't respond. His gaze stayed locked on that ground, on those faint, cruel stains. In his eyes now, there was only one thing left. He would find her. Even if he had to turn the whole world upside down. In a remote, desolate place far removed from the city, so far that not even a cell signal could reach, beside a narrow mountain stream, a lifeless body lay motionless in the wild grass. Bruised skin. Tangled hair. Clothes soaked with mud and dried blood. It was Hoài, the woman who had once been the light in Hung's eyes, now reduced to a flickering breath in the middle of nowhere. No one knew where she was. No one could have guessed that it was pure chance, a stroke of fate, that offered her the only sliver of life left, when death was already standing at the door. That same morning, as the mist still hovered over the water's surface, two young sisters in their early 20s were walking along the stream, foraging for snails and wild vegetables to trade at the market for rice. Their skin was sun-darkened, their hands rough from labor, yet their eyes held kindness, and their hearts remained gentle. On a deserted bend of the stream, the older sister suddenly stopped. She froze. There, lying face down beside the rocks, was a woman. Soaked hair, mud-covered clothes, motionless limbs. At first, they thought it might be someone passed out from alcohol. But as they approached, horror swept over them. A young woman. Bruised. Bloodied. Barely breathing. Her face pale as paper. Lips tinged blue. Dried blood at her temple. Her breath so faint, it trembled like a dying flame. Without hesitation, they stripped off their jackets, wrapped her frail body, and took turns carrying her on their backs, climbing the steep, jagged slope to their modest wooden hut nestled at the foot of the mountain. They didn't know who she was. Didn't know what had happened. All they knew was that life, no matter how fragile, was worth saving. Inside the quiet shack, where the only medical equipment was a few old herbal remedies, they laid Hoài on a rickety bamboo bed. Taking turns, they cleaned her wounds, used steam from boiled herbs, and applied traditional medicine passed down by their late mother. They gently rubbed turmeric on her bruises, placed roasted lemongrass and betel leaves on the swelling on her head. But her body alternated between burning with fever and turning cold like stone. She didn't wake. Didn't speak. Didn't stir. Each day, the sisters sat beside her, wiping sweat from her brow, feeding her rice water through a bamboo straw, clinging to hope. At night, they took turns keeping watch, listening for each weak breath. Terrified it might stop at any moment. Unable to wait any longer, they dug up every last coin they'd hidden in a cracked jar beneath the stove, money they'd saved for next month's rice. Then they ran down the mountain, asking a distant acquaintance to bring a doctor from the town. Later that afternoon, when the elderly doctor stepped into their humble hut, he placed a hand on Hoài forehead, checked her pupils, listened to her heart. His expression darkened. And with a raspy voice heavy with concern, he gave his diagnosis. Severe traumatic brain injury. Likely internal bleeding. High risk of coma. Memory loss. Even death, without immediate medical intervention. Silence filled the tiny home. The sisters lowered their heads, their eyes clouded with helplessness. They had no money. No vehicle. No family in town. All they had was compassion, and two worn, calloused hands. The doctor pleaded for them to bring her to a hospital. But they had no choice. They could only keep her there, praying for a miracle from the heavens. The younger brother stood by the window, gazing at the unconscious girl. Her cracked lips. Her tangled hair. Her battered face. They didn't know her name. Didn't know where she came from. But to them, in that moment, she was a life worth holding on to, with everything they had. From a secret hideout not far from the city, Hung's mother closely monitored every development through phone updates and news reports. She had believed that one swift move would be enough to erase Hoài from her son's life. And that everything would return to the order she had always desired. But things were spiraling in a direction she hadn't anticipated. The moment she learned that the police had officially opened an investigation, panic gripped her. She hadn't expected Hung to act so quickly. Nor had she imagined the authorities would launch such a relentless manhunt. Her once calm and calculated confidence now gave way to growing dread. She knew too well. Once something becomes a criminal case, even the faintest trace can be unearthed. And if a single link in the chain broke, her entire plan would collapse. In that fear, she arranged a secret meeting with the group of thugs she had hired. The rendezvous took place at an abandoned house near the edge of a forest. The same place where she had handed over the initial payment. Gone was the composed woman she had always presented to the world. She arrived pale, her eyes brimming with tension. The men, too, were different now. There was no more obedience, no more deference in their demeanor. Instead, They moved slowly, spoke vaguely, and laid down new demands. The ringleader, a burly man with shifty eyes, didn't mince words. He made it clear. Things are heating up. The cops are looking. If you don't want this to blow up, you'll have to pay more. He reminded her that the original job was only meant to be light handling. But now, with the possibility of forensic evidence being discovered, and potential ties between them and her being exposed, he warned that if things went south, they wouldn't go down alone. Her face went white. She, who had always prided herself on controlling every situation, was now being played. The men she had viewed as mere tools were now turning into a liability. They were sharper than she had imagined. Not just brute enforcers, but manipulators who knew how to hold leverage. Beneath her thick coat, her hands trembled. Even as she tried to maintain a composed facade, she had no choice. She agreed to pay a sum far beyond what she had hidden away for years. But she gritted her teeth and nodded. Because if she couldn't silence them, if even one of them was arrested and decided to talk, it would all be over. Not just the plan, but her reputation. Hung's entire future. All of it could be pulled into a storm she could no longer control. Before she left, she made one last desperate plea. No names. No phones. Stay away from the investigation sites. This must remain a secret, no one can ever know. Her words trembled, spoken less like instructions, and more like prayers to herself. But what she didn't realize was this. Once the money was handed over, what remained in their hands was no longer just silence. It was leverage. Evidence. A blade, ever hovering above her head. And now that she had stepped onto this road, there was no way back. These past few days, Hung has been like a man lost in a storm. Though the clues were scarce, a few tire tracks, faint drops of blood, vague eyewitness accounts, he threw himself into every alley, every remote path, driven by the fragile hope of finding her. Even the smallest lead felt like a lifeline. And with each day that passed without news, his heart sank deeper, tightened by fear and the looming weight of despair. Meanwhile, in that humble wooden cabin hidden in the mountains, Hoài remained in a deep coma. The swelling on her head worsened. Her fever soared without relief. Sweat soaked her body like rain. Delirium came in waves, her body tensing, then collapsing, as if life itself were slipping from her grasp. She lay there, her spirit flickering like a candle caught in a storm. Back home, Tony woke in tears every night. He called out for his mother, eyes wide in the dark, clutching her old shirt with tiny hands that refused to let go. Hung held the boy close, comforting him through the tears, while his own heart shattered with each sob. How could he ever explain to a child that his mother might never come back? The promises once whispered, the glances they once shared, the dreams of a quiet home together, all now crushed under the weight of conspiracy, hatred, and cruel silence. Can the love between Hung and Hoài survive this storm? Will Hung find her before it's too late? And in her deepest unconsciousness, can she still hear him calling her name? The answers lie ahead, in the next chapters of this relentless journey.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người. Hôm nay là video đầu tiên lên ở kênh mình. Mình rất mong là sẽ nhận được sự ủng hộ của mọi người về nội dung của Lý Hoài ca. Và sắp tới thì mình sẽ lên nhiều nội dung nữa hơn để cho mọi người cùng xem. Mình hy vọng là mọi người sẽ yêu quý và ủng hộ cho kênh mình nhiều hơn nha mọi người. Và trong thời gian tới thì ngoài nội dung của Lý Hoài ca ra thì mình sẽ lên nội dung của nhiều nội dung về các câu chuyện tình yêu khác, ví dụ như là Lý Tự Diệp hoặc là Lý Tự Quỳnh hoặc là Lytieuca hoặc là Huỳnh Diệu Hân, rồi rất nhiều nữa. Thì mình hy vọng là mọi người sẽ yêu quý và ủng hộ, và mọi ý kiến đóng góp mà mọi người người muốn đóng góp cho kênh thì mọi người hãy để ở phần bình luận mọi người nhé. Và nếu như yêu quý kênh cũng như là yêu quý các nhân vật như Lytieuca hay là cảnh sát Hùng thì mọi người nhớ đăng ký kênh, sau đó là bật chuông thông báo lên để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào mọi người nhé. Rất mong có thể gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo. Chào tạm biệt mọi người.